Hey guys, welcome to the misadventures of Bonnie and Clod. In this story, I'm going to demonstrate to you how for 5.5 months the current political justice system failed my neighborhood, law enforcement agencies, and yes, even the nuisance neighbors, Bonnie and Clod, who live across the street, the house sitting in the dark. Clod rents the house from his parents. This is a true story, and I have changed the names of all characters, and some events may be based on speculation or hearsay. Although, what I'm going to share with you was very serious at the time, I'm going to have a little fun at the expense of Bonnie and Clod. Let's get started by introducing you to Waco Sam Sr. Waco Sam lived with Bonnie and Clod and moved out 1 week after stealing my truck. The neighbors and I were only 4 months into this battle, trying to take control of our neighborhood when Waco Sam took my truck. I could have done a better job protecting my truck by pulling the starter fuse. With all of the chaos that I caused the little gang's operation, I guess I should have saw this coming. Anyway, I'll have the full story of events surrounding the theft of my truck in a future episode. But first, I have 3 stories I want to share with you in this episode. In the first story, we're going back to the very beginning. 4 months before Waco Sam stole my truck, and tell you how the little gang of homies were invited to our neighborhood, along with the story that inspired me to get cameras. The second story is about how this video that we are watching right now played a big role in the BJ and Heather's gold truck story. You definitely don't want to miss Clod's huge butt pucker moment. In the third story, I will share with you how another one of my videos led to this event in the Hello Clod story. It was also another very priceless moment for Clod. So hang in there with me. The bumbling little gang provided me some very entertaining moments along the way. With all that said, let's get this story started. To start with, I'm camera shy, so I'm going to speed through this very first video clip, just moments after setting up my new cameras on January 11th, to set up this story. I have no clue what Bonnie and Clod's new homies are doing around the 2 cars in the driveway. In and out of the trunk, in and out of the car doors, whatever. During the 2021 COVID lockdown, this nice hard-working young couple, Bonnie and Clod, lost their jobs and they also lost their way. They discovered fentanyl and turned to a life of crime to support their habit. In late December of 2021, after burning up the engines in both of their cars and 2 loaner cars from Clod's parents, they were on foot and moved to a nearby motel. There, they joined up with BJ. I considered BJ to be the kingpin of their little gang of cockroaches. I heard through conversations with a neighbor that BJ's dog bit Clod, and by the 1st of January, Bonnie and Clod were back home nursing their dog bite. A few days later, I noticed a couple of fellas and Clod having a conversation on Clod's front porch. My first thought was maybe these fellas were part of a community outreach service inviting Clod to seek help for his addiction. Well, I totally misread that situation. As it turns out, it was BJ and a homie talking to Clod. The next day, January 3rd, around mid-morning, I heard a lot of racket outside in the street. It was a flatbed tow truck unloading BJ's small Nissan car into the left side of his driveway. Clod was allowing BJ and his band of homies to move in. The Nissan was broke down and never driven anywhere during its stay at Bonnie and Clod's house. Over time, it became clear that the Nissan was being used as storage for stolen miscellaneous items brought in by the homeless drug addicts in our area in exchange for drugs. The constant flow of foot traffic exploded overnight. That was the first thing that stood out to the neighbors and I. Meet BJ, the fellow in the white t-shirt and red sleeves. While we watched BJ and an unknown homie load a stolen shop welder into the back of his truck, I'm going to tell you the story that inspired me to get cameras. During that first week after BJ moved in, besides the heavy foot traffic, my neighbors and I started noticing another odd situation at the house. For example, they were bringing in pickups and repainting them in the garage. I also caught BJ swapping out a license plate one morning. They did a lot of their work in the middle of the night under the cover of darkness. On Sunday morning, January 9th, 1 week after BJ moved in, I noticed a 1-ton oil-filled service truck parked in front of the mailbox at Clod's house. Some of Clod's homies were picking through the toolboxes and removing pipe wrenches and other tools. After getting updated about Bonnie and Clod's situation and my 30 years of experience in the oil industry, things just didn't add up. On Sunday mornings, oil-filled trucks should be out on a job site or parked in a company yard. So I trusted my gut and called 911. A sheriff's deputy arrived and confirmed that the truck was stolen. The deputy asked if I had any cameras. At this point, I had no cameras. Since there was no evidence of who was driving the service truck, it was recovered and that was the end of that. Not knowing much about cameras, I decided to do some research. By the afternoon of January 11th, I had my new cameras up, running, and ready for whatever came next. Now that we have the story set up out of the way, it's time to start having a little bit of fun. Like a kid with a new toy, I was checking outside quite often to see what was going on. It only took 3 days after installing my cameras on January 14th to catch my next story. This is the story of Heather's gold truck. Here we have BJ arriving in a solid gold pickup. I had no idea how valuable this video would be at this time. This was the type of activity that aroused our neighborhood suspicions in the first place. BJ will back this truck into the garage and over time begin modifying the paint and swap out license plates if he has another set available. After completing the modifications, BJ will drive the truck around town as if it was his own. Things didn't always go smooth for BJ. After spending all night like a cockroach, pillaging and plundering throughout the city, he finally brings home the gold. With the help of Clod and Buster, BJ's dog, BJ finally gets his booty tucked away in the garage. Later that afternoon, after getting the all clear from the homie on the roof, it looks like BJ and Clod have some very important business to take care of. Why buy a truck when you can steal one? Also, later that evening, under the cover of darkness, I catch Bonnie and Clod returning home in the gold truck. And Bonnie was driving. It looks to me like they needed some groceries. At last, now they have something to drive. If you remember, back in the beginning of this video, I told you that Bonnie and Clod burned up the engines in all of their vehicles. I later learned that Clod's dad repaired the engine in Clod's car but refused to give it back to him. In future episodes, I will share with you how Clod's parents used the car to screw Clod and our neighborhood. Clod's parents started getting a lot of heat from my neighbors. I have great neighbors and they were all knee-deep in this fight with me. But let's stick to this story for now. I check back in a few minutes and catch Clod beginning the modification process with a can of black spray paint. Let's focus on the license plate. It appears that Clod also includes the license plate as part of his modification process by spraying a black line across the bottom. At this point, Clod has piqued my curiosity. I'm finally capturing on video what the neighbors and I have been witnessing since all this began. I learned later on that this little gang of cockroaches had a little bit of a reputation. After leaving the motel, the law enforcement agencies lost track of them. After the recovery of the oil fill truck, I believe the word was out that the little gang had moved into Clod's house, explaining the increase of police presence in our neighborhood. But still, at this point, I have no idea what's going on with this truck. Nor did I have any idea that I was going to become part of this story. While painting around the rear wheel, Clod pops his head up, takes a quick look, and has a huge butt pucker moment. Let's watch Clod's reaction as the sheriff deputy turns around at the end of the street and does another slow drive-by. Clod walks toward the rear of the truck, takes a quick look and sees the deputy coming back his way, and checks his work on the license plate. But while trying to act cool and calm, Clod decides it's time to wrap things up and head into the house. Once Clod decides the coast is clear, he makes his move and conceals the truck back inside the garage. While we watch Clod close up shop for the night, and in the next clip watch a city PD do a slow drive-by, I'm going to set up how this short story ends. Over the next 2 days, BJ and Clod will continue to modify the paint and take the truck on short trips. Unfortunately for BJ, his luck was about to run out. On the 17th of January, just 3 days after BJ brought his gold truck home, a very nice young lady named Heather showed up on our street. She spotted one of my neighbors and pulled over and asked my neighbor if he had seen a gold truck in our area. My neighbor was fully aware of the situation and told her to come see me. She was alarmed at first. Her GPS showed that her truck was at my house. My neighbor reassured Heather that I was the one she needed to talk to. While standing on my front porch, Heather explained her situation. On edge and being very cautious myself, I asked her and her boyfriend to meet me in the garage. Once in the garage, I showed Heather this video of BJ arriving in a gold truck. She replied, "That's my baby." We then exchanged information and I sent this video to her cell phone. Now that all of her questions have been answered, she decided to park around the corner and call 911. Like I said earlier, because of today's anti-law enforcement political environment, pro-criminal justice DAs, and an understaffed sheriff's department, response times can take a little longer now. This is where BJ's luck begins to run out. Right now, it looks like he's a little bothered about something. I wonder if he saw Heather and I talking in the garage. Behind BJ, in the garage, is Heather's gold truck. Heather is parked down the street, watching and waiting for a response from the sheriff's department. Heather and I have been in constant contact since she left my house 30 minutes earlier. The neighbors and I wondered if they had a police scanner in Clod's house. There were a lot of times where it seemed like they would split just before the good guys showed up. The neighbors are all abuzz about the events taking place, and I am getting text messages and phone calls. I operate my cameras on my cell phone. My cameras stop recording when I leave the app to answer calls and texts. When I return to live view, BJ has hooked up to the little trailer and goes on the run. Notice the dark trim paint job at the bottom. Heather immediately began pursuit. While in contact with the 911 operator, she was able to describe the transformation of her truck. But she eventually lost BJ during the pursuit. I continued my contact with Heather throughout the evening. I was also keeping an eye outside just in case BJ returned. Sure enough, he came back. I let Heather know, and she relayed the information to the 911 operator. She was across town and once again headed back in my direction. BJ didn't hang around long this time and once again left before the sheriff's department arrived or Heather could make it back. As it turns out, this is the final run in Heather's gold truck. Heather sent me a text message around 10:20 p.m. thanking me for helping her get her gold truck back. BJ was pulled over and arrested. The police department called Heather and told her she could come get her truck. It was a good night that had a happy ending for Heather. Now, let's see how BJ's arrest affected the home of Bonnie and Clod. About 50 minutes after receiving Heather's happy text, I catch one of BJ's partners in crime showing up for work. As he is walking across the lawn, a CHP officer rides by on his Harley. It becomes quite obvious that Bonnie, Clod, and Homeboy are unaware of BJ's arrest. Evidently, the homeboy pacing around in the yard was supposed to meet up with BJ. This was also another scenario witnessed by the neighbors and I during the past few weeks. Teams of homies would meet up after dark like cockroaches to begin their night of pillaging and plundering from hard-working people throughout the metro area. They would steal vehicles, catalytic converters, mail, all sorts of miscellaneous equipment, tools, and anything that had value. Bonnie's mother, who will join the fight later on, sent me a screenshot of a generator for sale on Craigslist, posted by Little Miss Bonnie. All of this will be covered in future episodes. By now, panic is starting to set in. Bonnie takes control of the lights. The neighbors and I believe that the lights were used as code. Although we all had our opinions on what the codes were, we all agreed that the lights out meant that there was trouble and they were closed for business. It seems like they were a little unsure of what to do about the lights. Eventually, they decide something is seriously wrong. They finally turn out the lights and the party's over. This is BJ returning back to Bonnie and Clod's after spending one night in jail. I was shocked to see BJ back in our neighborhood so soon. In my opinion, one night in jail is not a deterrent for a career criminal, a man in his 50s with a history of grand theft auto. Anyway, let's move on to the last story in this episode. After helping Heather recover her gold truck, I only had to wait 5 days until I captured another useful video. It seems like just another beautiful day in the neighborhood. A couple of friendly people from a nearby neighborhood, unaware of our situation, will ride by and wave at the couple leaving Bonnie and Clod's house. Notice the young lady walking up to the driver's side of her pickup. Watch her pause and focus her eyes toward the traffic coming her way. Hello, Clod. Clod is at the beginning of a day gone bad. Let's see that one more time. The driver in the red pickup had to avoid hitting Clod. My neighbor told me later that he heard Clod rattling the wrought iron gate at his front porch. Clod was trying to hide. My neighbor confronted Clod and ran him off. My cameras caught Clod running from that neighbor. All this deputy knew was the direction Clod ran. Prior to the pit stop at my neighbor's house, Clod was busted at a nearby business for receiving and in possession of a stolen vehicle. Somehow, he managed to avoid capture. Once again, blown away from what I had just witnessed, I stepped outside to see what was going on. Just off screen to the right, a CHP officer had parked in front of the neighbor's house that Clod ran from. A few of the neighbors had already gathered around the officer's unit. They were in conversation with the officer about what they had witnessed. As I walked up to the group, one of my neighbors asked me if I had anything on my cameras. Everyone, including the officer, was very pleased with the results, along with several eyewitness accounts that only took about an hour and 45 minutes to get the warrants they needed processed. The sun is setting as our local law enforcement units arrive. Notice the deputies arriving from the right side of your screen. This will be the largest show of force our neighborhood has seen since all this began. My neighbors and I were very excited about this evening's events. We truly believed that this would be the end of Bonnie and Clod's run on our street. But sadly, we were just going to get a long lesson on how soft our criminal justice system had become. This would be a good time to say thank you to all the men and women who wear the badge. It was at this point that the neighbors and I would get to know many of them. Over time, we would learn just how frustrated they were with this judicial system. After arresting and booking these perpetrators of crime for the umpteenth time, they would walk out of the precinct before the ink was dry. Unfortunately for our neighborhood, this will not be the last time we see this scenario play out. It's only just the beginning. Once again, I had to break away and bring my neighbors up to speed. When I returned to live view, Bonnie had already answered the door. She is standing with the CHP officer at the front end of her walkway, wearing her pajamas and a new set of silver bracelets. We, the neighbors, affectionately called her the brains of the operation. Next, the deputies finally have their man. Clod is being escorted to the curb wearing shorts only. Clod was charged with fleeing deputies, receiving or in possession of a stolen vehicle, and in possession of drugs. Now it's time to officially meet Miss Bonnie. She is also getting an invite to have a seat at the curb. Bonnie had an outstanding warrant for her arrest, but failed to appear in court on drug-related charges. While we wait for BJ to surrender, I want to give a shout out to our county animal control officers. Buster, the very lovable pit bull, was treated very well and taken to the animal shelter at the end of this raid. I wonder what the hell Clod did to piss off Buster. If you'll remember, Buster bit Clod while they were staying at the motel. Anyway, this will not be the last time our county animal control officers will be involved at Bonnie and Clod's home. Clod had an interesting collection of little critters. I'll have the details of that in a future episode. Now would be a good time to tell you about future episodes that I am planning to release. In upcoming episodes, I'll be covering more auto thefts and recoveries, a catalytic converter theft operation, the shutdown and raid of a huge mail theft operation by the postal inspector, along with a lot of other shenanigans. But finally, at the very end, I will share the grand finale, the event and awesome raid carried out by the city police department. That's the raid that finally put the nail in the coffin for Miss Bonnie and Clod. It was a major event that they brought upon themselves without any help from our neighborhood. Keep in mind, this video is for entertainment purposes only. Should you ever decide to get involved in a similar situation such as ours, do so at your own risk. I've already shown you the price I paid. Thank God that's as bad as it got. And if you are interested in following this story to the end, please make sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share. It would really help me out a lot, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you. With that said, it's time to finish up this story. Here we go, back to BJ. He's finally surrendered and is being arrested for the second time in 5 days. I never heard what this warrant was about, but I'm sure we all have a good idea. As we watch Clod and BJ loading up for the overnight trip downtown, only to be released by mid-morning the next day and resume business as usual, I want to tell you a little bit about Miss Bonnie. She is a very beautiful and charming young lady. Over the next 5 months, I will engage in several conversations with her. She eventually admitted to me in a moment of clarity that fentanyl was the drug of choice for the little gang of homies. I would also take the occasion and try to encourage her to seek help. Later on, Bonnie's mother would become an ally of the neighbors and I. We all worked together trying to get little Miss Bonnie the help she needed. As we say goodnight to little Miss Bonnie, I want to close with some final thoughts. I place very little blame on Miss Bonnie and Clod. The way I see it, all of the blame falls on the current administration pro-criminal justice system. If these kids would have spent enough time in jail to detox and get clean, maybe I would still have my truck today, and our neighborhood would have been spared months of agony. I blame the COVID lockdown policies that left these kids with idle hands, resulting in their discovery of fentanyl. I also blame the open borders policy that's allowing fentanyl to flood our country and poison our kids. All of this has placed unwarranted burdens on our local law enforcement agencies and the communities that they represent. I've tried to keep this video upbeat, fun, and entertaining, but in reality, it was 5 months of hell. I'm just an old fart with a heart condition, and it took its toll on me physically, emotionally, and financially. I lost a lot of sleep and lived in fear of the unknown. But I wasn't in this fight alone. I am surrounded by some very awesome neighbors. They deserve a lot of thanks from me. We all voluntarily elected me to be headquarters. I guess you could say I had the home field advantage. They had more confrontations with Clod, Clod's parents, and the foot traffic homies that passed by their homes day and night. All information flowed through me. It was truly a team effort. I still have a lot of entertaining videos ahead. Some funny situations and some very sad situations that broke my heart. All fueled by the evil drug fentanyl. That's all I have for now. Please be nice in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share. To all you good people, stay safe, be happy, and may God shower you with His blessings. Thank you for watching.
Yo.